The Google Pixel 10 Pro and Pro XL are actually kind of boring phones this year, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The Pixel 10 has a bunch of features that just work, and that might sound familiar to a lot of iPhone users because that's what Apple has always preached with their devices. And that's done by design on Google's end. They're looking to target iPhone users pretty heavily, and that really started last year with the Pixel 9 and that redesign. And that's continuing this year, especially with the addition of Pixel Snap, which is essentially Google's version of MagSafe. Now, we've been using the Pixel 10 Pro and Pro XL for about a week, as well as the regular Pixel 10, but we've been focusing on the Pro models. And for the most part, everything that I say in this review is going to be the same for both of these Pro models, because the only real difference is going to be the size, battery size, and the charging speed on the Pro XL. Now, Pixel Snap is unsurprisingly my favorite feature of the Pixel 10. As somebody that does use the iPhone and absolutely loves all of the MagSafe accessories that are here. And it's about time that an Android manufacturer put the magnets inside the phone. Now, Samsung claims that their phones are Qi 2 ready, which doesn't really mean anything because they already had Qi charging. So they're basically just adopting the standard without putting magnets inside. Instead, you have to buy a case. And the only other Android phone that has magnets inside is that HMD Skyline, which, let's face it, nobody bought, and probably even more people had never heard of them. And now that Google has magnets inside of the Pixel 10, it's very likely that that will be the new trend in 2026. In fact, I'd be very surprised if Samsung did not put magnets inside of the Galaxy S26, which should launch in January. Of course, the big update with the Pixel 10 series is that new custom-built ISP. Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, Google does a lot of computational photography on the Pixel, and having its own ISP, or image signal processor, that is custom built to the Pixel, that means that you're going to be able to get some really incredible shots on the same hardware as last year's Pixel 9 Pro. In practice, the camera's pretty good. It's more consistent than the Pixel 9 Pro was, at least in my experience, but it's still not quite as consistent as the Oppo Find X8 Ultra. Now, that custom ISP is part of the new Tensor G5, which is the first TSMC manufactured Tensor chipset. Many thought that this would make the Tensor G5 on par with the Snapdragon 8 Elite or the MediaTek 9400, but that was never gonna happen. Google's not focused on peak performance with these Tensor chipsets. Instead, they are focused on making their devices as efficient as possible with their features like Magic Queue and Live Translation, which do use AI and a few LLMs that are built into the Tensor G5. So of course that means that benchmark scores are quite low again, but honestly I don't even care, because in day-to-day usage the Tensor G5 performs very well. Now, the Tensor G4 from last year had already been a pretty big improvement over the Tensor G3, but that Tensor G5 takes it even further. I very rarely felt the phone getting warm, typically only when playing games or using the camera for a long time when the device would get a little bit warm, but it wasn't so hot that you couldn't hold on to it, which pretty much puts it on par with every other phone on the market. So is the Tensor G5 good? So far, yeah. Now let's move on to software. Of course, this launches with Android 16 QPR1, which is the Material 3 Expressive update for a lot of people. Material 3 Expressive is going to take some getting used to, as it is a pretty big design departure from the previous iteration of Material design. Now, I really like the design. It's different and really makes the Pixel stand out versus the pretty boring design that we had on stock Android or Pixel UI for the last many years. And some people won't like it, and that's perfectly fine because the Pixel isn't for everyone, just like the Galaxy isn't for everyone or the iPhone isn't for everyone. The Pixel 10 series does have one of my favorite AI features to come out in 2025, and that's Magic Queue. Now, it's not perfect, but it is a great addition to the Pixel. It's a very helpful assistant, and it reminds me a lot of Google Now from, I don't know, maybe a decade ago at this point. Now, as an example, earlier this week, I needed to call Delta about my flight to Berlin next week for IFA. When calling Delta, Magic Queue was able to bring up all of my flight details right there in the dialer, so it's a lot easier to find my confirmation number and any other details that Delta customer service was going to need. And this is because Magic Queue was able to have access to your Gmail, so I was able to see that I had flights coming up. It also has access to your calendar, and a few other apps that you can give it access to if you wish. Now Magic Queue also works in the Messages app, so if somebody were to ask when's your next flight, it would pop up with that suggestion that you can just send straight to them, and it'll tell them, you know, what time it is, the airline, the flight number, and even where you're going. Now finally, let's talk about battery life, which is arguably one of the most important aspects of a Pixel device, because it hasn't really been great since we moved over to Tensor. Now I will preface this by saying that the adaptive battery has only just started to kick in on the Pixel 10 Pro XL, so I do expect that this will improve over the coming days. But for my usage, I'm able to get 7 to 8 hours of screen on time per charge, and it's able to get me through a full day with about 30% left. That's typically with about 6 hours of screen on time. If I'm really pushing it, typically on the weekends, I'll hit like 7 or 8. Of course, this is all with my usage, so your usage will most likely be different from mine, because no two people use their phone the same, and you don't use your phone the same every day. Now that's good, but it's not outstanding. For me, anything that's between 6 and 10 hours of screen on time, I classify as good battery life. Anything above 10 hours, I classify as great. And right now, the only phones that have really hit that 10-hour mark are phones from Realme, Oppo, and OnePlus. Now, the Galaxy S25 Ultra did hit that 10-hour mark for me, but that was before any updates hit, which seemed to have affected battery life on that Galaxy S25 Ultra. So the Pixel 10 Pro and Pro XL will get you through the day, and then you can slap it on the Pixel Snap charger or plug it in the old-fashioned way, of course. But that's my Pixel 10 Pro review. If you wanted more thoughts on the Pixel 10 Pro XL, head on over to AndroidHeadlines.com, where I've already written over 6,000 words on the Pixel 10 Pro XL, and there will be more reviews coming for the other two models in the coming weeks. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.